And welcome back to another exciting episode of Mind the Force, a nerdy podcast about Star Wars and mental health. I am Sith Lord Kristine, excited to be back in the seat with Jedi Master James. Um,
Pleasure to be here.
James, how are you? How are you doing? I haven't spoken to you since I was naturally incapacitated.
Quite well. Well, yes, since then Christine's had a baby, and congrats on that. And we've both been keeping stock and stored with our Star Wars literature. So just been powering through these work, and just learning more about the Jedi and Sith lore across Legends and canon universes.
Oh my god, James has been blowing me out of the water on Star Wars reading. Um, Definitely nothing. I'm not. I'm working to catch up.
Same. I'm working to catch up to everyone who's been around the past 50 years. There's so much depth to it, and there's so much more to explore. Even when you think you've just tapped the surface, you really haven't. So it's a lot, but it's good to engage with the source material as much as possible, given that we have almost half a century now worth of Star Wars material.
It's a really wonderful well to mine, and I'm so excited that I've brought you to the dark side. I got
You
you.
should.
I got you. I got you reading all this dark side ideology, and once you start, you can't go back. You're
It's
just like, wait,
fascinating.
wait, that makes sense. Wait, that makes sense too. Wait a second, what he's saying makes more sense than everything the Jedi say.
I see it I see it in the real world too, honestly. I think a lot of what makes Star Wars so great is the psychology of the characters because it accurately captures how people really think, different viewpoints across life, good and evil. And to know more about these characters is to know more about life, and that's why we do this whole podcast with the mental health component because it is very rich, It is up there to me with Game of Thrones and Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings in terms of lore. Yeah, some of the movies can be cheesy, but it's as deep as a Greek corpus of legends. It's not a world, it's a galaxy.
Well said, my friend. It's why we do what we do.
For sure.
We could have picked any fictional world out there, but we picked Star Wars because we know quality.
Sure do. Yeah, and emotion. There's emotion too.
Oh yes, oh yes. Um, and I'm, as always, very excited to get into a brand new character today. We are covering the one and only badass motherfucker that is Mace Windu. Shout out to Samuel L. Jackson and his absolutely glorious live action rendition of this fascinating character.
Only he could do
Um,
it. Yep.
Only he can do it. Only he can
Wouldn't
do
have
it. He
worked
brought us
otherwise.
he brought us that menacing scowl. He brought us purple lightsabers. He did not bring us the first motherfucker in Star Wars, but I'm sure somebody will.
The bad motherfucker wallet. It is all one shared universe.
Right? Right? Are we living in the same universe as Mace Windu?
Hey, it was a long
Um,
time ago. Yeah, so you can't rule it out.
right? Long time ago at some fucking point. Um, no, but this was cool. I feel like with Mace Windu in the movies, you really get such a surface level of who he is. He's just kind of this mean Jedi who is rude to Anakin, and obviously you can kind of see his hubris in the films, how that aided with Palpatine wedging his way in there with manipulating Anakin and the bigger picture around him as he was wont to do. And you can definitely see how Windu is part of the problem. But what's nice about what we've been able to learn through obviously legends content and reading more of his canon content, as there are comic books and novels that we'll talk about for Windu. You just obviously get a bigger picture and a very complex person, a very good person, a person with a lot of really good intention, that I think just got manipulated along with everyone else. Someone who sees in very black and white, that we'll touch on more. And I think that was also part of his issue, was that rigidity and control. Yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm excited to flesh this out. We have a great guest today. Gilbert Barjon, who we'll bring on later, to get his professional um, psychological expertise on this very interesting character. Before we get into the big business, we have the little business, as we are wont to do. To stay up to date on everything Mind the Force, please check us out in all the places. Check out mindtheforce.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook, and check us out on all your favorite podcast streaming platforms. Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're on YouTube where you can see our glorious faces. Pocket Cast, Castbox. If you click the link, then you'll find all the clickables. Please make sure to shoot us 5-star ratings because it's how the internet finds out that we're cool. And for all your big Star Wars thoughts, feels, and smoke, please feel free to shoot us an email at mindtheforcepodcast@gmail.com. We're here for all the love and all the smoke.
Always here for the smoke. And the cauterized limbs too, which we'll get into. So, content spoiler warning. Perfect segue. Mind the Force podcast is a retrospective on Star Wars characters across all Star Wars content. All the films, TV shows, novels, comic books, video games, you name it, are up for discussion. So if you don't want any aspect of currently released Star Wars content to be spoiled, you know the drill. Turn around now.
So I think to get a good general look at who Mace Windu was, I mean, what we do know about him on a surface level, he is a Jedi Master, of course. He was on the Council. We know he was second only to Yoda, as far as the hierarchy of the Jedi Council. And honestly, that's all and that's kind of, I mean, he's very skeptical of things. And I feel like that's what you get of him in the movie. I think what's interesting, especially with, actually, and I realize this is the first really, like, just straight shooting Jedi that we've done.
Yeah, who's just the archetype by the book. There's
Right?
all these dogmas going, but he generally just has a heavy hand. But ultimately, he's like, this is the way. We're just gonna go with the blueprint, with the program.
Right?
Adapts, of course, but
Right? I'm not going to fall to the dark side. Like all these other
right.
people we've talked about.
Keep it simple. I'm gonna be a hard ass. I'm gonna be a bad mother effer.
Right?
But that's as far as I'll go to get that agita and testosterone out. But other than that, I am never messing with that dark side stuff. And anyone who even may, I'm gonna keep an eye on them.
Right? And even though he's like, I'm going to dip my toe in it. I'm going to dip my toe in it, but not the whole foot. I'm just gonna pull. He pulls little strings.
Well, he's the closest in Palpatine or to a Sith in Force. That's why he's able to actually, in one perspective, hold his own against him in Revenge of the Sith, because he actually used that physical force, that powerful force, almost the point of Sith lightning. Where he's channeling into that anger or just on the brink of anger. You do see it when he's clashing. He has that angry, hateful look on his face. He hates evil. He hates Sith, and he's very clear in that. So, but he channels it because some Jedi do use different Force techniques and Force perspectives, really. So he is the most straight shooting Jedi, but basically he's just a Mario Kart with extra boosters. He's got a lot of juice to him.
Yeah, I mean, it's Samuel Jackson. He got all the juice.
That was the clause to get him into the movies.
Right?
Extra juice and
Right?
purple lightsaber.
There you go. So just to get into a little bit of his backstory, Mace Windu was a obviously force sensitive human born on Harun Kal, and born in 72 BBY. So he did not make it to his 72nd birthday.
Sadly.
That would have made him. He died in 19 BBY. So wait, quick math. What's 72 minus 19?
That would be 53.
He was 53 when he got tossed out that window.
Looked young for 53, yeah.
Right? I mean, black don't crack, James. Let me tell you. I also want to point out early. I want to make this very clear that I'm of the camp that Mace Windu did not die when he got thrown out that window. I don't think he's fucking dead. When there is some follow-up Mace Windu content, we will be back here to talk more about it, because I don't think he died when he got thrown out that window. Like, he wasn't gonna go out like that.
Well, if Robot Chicken is canon, he did land, and a janitor swept him up along with
There you
Palpatine
go.
and Darth Maul. I like to think they're still living. We know Maul survived. Maybe that janitor is collecting fallen Jedi instead, putting
Right?
them back together, and then putting them back out in the world.
I'm
So I want to see
saying,
that spinoff.
Filoni, Filoni. If Maul
Just
survived falling down that fucking crevice of like a chamber, why couldn't Mace Windu survive
he fell into
falling out
his
that window?
he fell in a speeder just like Anakin. Dave Filoni,
Right? He could have
please.
fallen on a speeder or landed on some sort of ledge or like tuck and rolled. I don't fucking know, but I don't think he's dead.
Dave Filoni, please call Seth Green and partner with Robot Chicken to flesh out that spinoff. Thank you.
Right? You know you want to. It's probably already happening, let's be honest. But yeah, so he died at 53. You know, he's born on Harun Call, but of course, as the Jedi are also wont to do, that's my phrase of the day. Once it was discovered that he was force sensitive, or you know what? That he was extra force sensitive. So the people of Harun Kal are actually all quite force sensitive. It's a planet of people that are kind of quite prone to it. But he just had a special affinity to the force. And so the Jedi will come a calling, and they will take your children. They will take them away. And yeah, so he was of course raised properly in the Jedi Temple as a Jedi youngling and eventually a Padawan. He already was quite closed off as a child. He was prone to have like premonitions, like precognitive premonitions, that were called shatter points. These visions or visions of shatter points. Pretty much seeing like when certain situations would come like to a head rather. Sometimes they would be very violent, they would be very chaotic, and he was like plagued with these from the time he was very young, obviously then through his time as a youngling and a Padawan, and it really shaped his identity, really shaped, which will be a really overarching theme of our discussion, need for control. Like, he really needed to keep control in order to feel safe. And that really stemmed from the visions of just not being able to, like, if it was going to have this horrible outcome, he wasn't able to do anything about that. Like, so imagine you're like a small kid and you just know these horrible things are coming and there's nothing you could do to stop it. Like, you're going to feel so powerless.
Which makes him kind of a foil and a counterpoint to Anakin, who also had visions in a different way, of course. But there was that element of like Greek, prophecy or biblical prophecy, even, which I love literarily. It's tied into it, and this was all covered in uh, Shatterpoint, the sorry, not James Luceno, the Matthew Stover, one of the best Star Wars authors, author of Labyrinth of Evil and Revenge of the Sith, the adaptation. He did this one, which is the Legends Mace Windu novel, which is no longer canon, of course, by definition, but it is very, very true to the character, whose version also appears in the Revenge of the Sith adaptation. So Matthew Stover's, king of his craft. He really captures who Mace is through accurate and very poignant prose, and also through an internal perspective of Mace that we really haven't gotten through any of the movies. The camera's always been on him, but this is the first time, really, in his own standalone installment, that we get to see life from his eyes.
And it's so nice to get that more in-depth view, because it really then, like, it makes sense with like the points of his childhood, like the adult that he grew up to be, as far as the hypervigilance and that hyper control, because it really is, it's a trauma response, what it is at the end of the day, because you're having these horrible visions, you can't do anything about it. You're at some point removed from your family, so you already are, as most Jedi are, quite emotionally stunted. So I think he was already kind of in that place of like needing to feel control to feel safe. And I can only imagine that, I mean, you know me and my feelings of the Jedi. I think they made it worse. Um, but you're not getting any kind of emotional warmth to counteract that. Um, he's really just kind of then doubling down on his connection to the Force, and then almost finding warmth in that, like finding grounding in his connection to the Force.
He assimilated to the dogma, like no questions. I'll never be evil. I'll
Yeah,
never be a Sith. I will be a bad motherfucker, but I'll follow this code that was laid out for me since I was taken as a child. Basically, a Buddhist monk who's just like celibate, everything. He's it's not even a question for him. But you kind of need that to bring the ultimate balance and the chosen one. You have the unorthodox sort of connections via Qui-Gon. You have Yoda's wisdom and flexibility, which can even be superseded in some ways by Qui-Gon, who taught him how to become a Force ghost and achieve immortality. Whereas Mace, maybe he didn't because he was so rigid, and he followed the code to a T that he focused more on the law, sort of thing of the land than
yeah,
rather the actual transcendental elements of the Force. However, the living force versus sort of the collective force, as we discussed. He does appear
hmm,
as a voice in Rise of Skywalker, so you hear his voice talking to Rey. So in a way, maybe he did achieve that, even if he isn't all sparkly, glowy. So, but
right,
what I'm saying is to tie this all in is, he did achieve mastery. Which something Anakin didn't. That's his one up on him, I guess. But he ultimately did follow his unique path in that rigid dogma to become his own individual with his own connection to the Force. And I think he was wise. I think his connection with the Force ultimately did achieve that in a different way than Qui-Gon and Yoda. But I think he did find that peace after death sort of thing, just through the virtue of his voice existing
yeah.
thereafter.
I think what I do appreciate, because as he like grew up like in the Jedi Temple, like he was always that kind of very like pragmatic, like to himself, like very strong, very powerful, would go on to become a great leader even amongst the other Padawans. But was never warm. But I think what I do appreciate about his relationship with the Force is that because he was so pragmatic, though he did have that very rigid sense of justice, of like this is right and wrong, this is good and evil, he did develop his own form of lightsaber combat, called, I believe it's pronounced Vapad, and it pulls from light and dark elements. I think he was pragmatic enough to see that some things about the dark side were helpful, were necessary. Um, it's that you could like pull little pieces from it and be like, you can use this to your benefit without like obviously going full dark side. And I guess I respect that he saw that, because it's so true. It's like the absolute, like he was absolute in a lot of things, but I like that he did see the benefits of that.
He knew his limits. This guy could hang, like he'd like, all right, two drink cutoff, or even none at all. Really, he was very disciplined, and I think that was both his strength and his fatal flaw in the end. Like any Greek archetype, it is all I guess the Greeks wrote all of literature, the
Right.
foundations. So it was all there. There is that tragic element. He is a tragic character, but ultimately did prevail through his efforts over the Sith. I think Anakin maybe even had guilt over his death, as with Padme. I
Oh,
think he looked at him as a
absolutely.
mentor and did respect and love him. I think they loved each other in a competitive way. But you tied it into the dark side, and right, while he was short of developing Force lightning, he did flirt with that to again be very strong and powerful against someone where he could hold his own against Palpatine. Palpatine even said to Anakin, that Mace Windu's lack of empathy may be his shatter point, which is kind of a funny play on words there. But Maul was also involved with one. So there is, clearly if Maul could do it and Mace can do it, he's going a little bit beyond to get those extra skills that even someone like Yoda doesn't have. Yoda's
Right.
more of a hopper and a
He
very
does like
powerful in the Force. But if you
he
watch
does
even
like the hop.
watch the 2003 Clone Wars, the I can never say his name, Gendy Tartakovsky animations, where he's
Yeah.
just wrecking the topography of the land. He's like an earthquake. He's
Oh my
destroying
god.
droid upon droid
I love it.
army. He's very
I
tough.
love when they land. They're all just like douche. Like they land so hard and everything shakes around them.
Oh yeah, no, it's it's
Oh my
it's
god.
I know you can only really show that in the animation, but like
Right.
he was that's in war, that's his ultimate strength being unveiled, and it's clear why he was on the council. He's probably one of the most powerful beings of all time, next to maybe Plagueis and Palpatine themselves and some early Sith like Vitiate.
Right.
He didn't sell his soul and split into Horcruxes like Emperor Vitiate, but he,
He
as
did.
far
He
as
did not.
natural law would allow.
Right. Right. Almost very much like Kenobi. Definitely like saw like his world. I mean, I guess now like Kenobi really saw like his world around him fall apart because he lived. Not that Mace isn't alive. Mace is alive.
Right, he's still there.
Hashtag Mace is alive. And I think that it's actually something really poignant, something really beautiful that I came across in my research of Mace, um, which came from I don't think it was Star Wars Explained. It was another it was another like compilation video. Like spoiler warning, aside from reading content, I also use compilation videos. Thank you to all the YouTubers who make these great videos. Because sometimes you need to take some notes. And and it was said that when Mace was putting together his lightsaber, which is something that that younglings will do before they are taken on by a Jedi Master for training, they'll obviously like go into the cave where the kyber crystals are. The kyber crystal calls out to them, they find it, and then they build their lightsaber. um and and he struggled a bit with his lightsaber building, but something that he eventually did learn is that he needed to stop looking at the pieces of the lightsaber as if like they needed to be put together. Like they're already a whole, they already are existing as a whole. um like it's not broken, it doesn't need to be built, it's already there, all the pieces you need are there. um and I don't know if anyone's ever seen um like the visual, I guess the visual assembly of a lightsaber when younglings do it, but it's like you sit there and you meditate and like you literally like use um like the force like put it all together.
It's telekinesis, really.
Telekinesis, thank you. I was gonna say telepathy, and I'm like, that's not right, and I don't want the internet to think I'm stupid. I
I
know the word.
telepathically read that. Well,
I mean, you were right here.
it's kind of how the Sith would assemble holocrons. If you read the Darth Bane novels too,
Yeah.
he painstakingly did it, but for an evil purpose. He was creating a Horcrux. Really, there's the good arts and the black magic arts, sort of. And Bane did that while they construct the red kyber crystal lightsabers with the holocron. It kept exploding. It was so intricate. He couldn't get it right, and it was frustrating him. He was putting too much power, too little, doing it too quickly, taking too long to do it. It would deteriorate. So that's how Bane was, very meticulous with his rule of two and his big perspective long term. So I would say Mace was the counterpart to that as well. Also a powerful figure, but he liked to see all the parts, the different parts, the sum, as well as the individual parts, and look at the big picture. And that affected his dogma because as a child, he's raised in uncertainty. In a jungle, what's in a jungle? A cat's going to jump out and bite your head off. You don't. It is uncertainty on its core level. He wanted a little bit more rigidity in his life, and that was his control, his masking of emotions, because emotions are messy. I think ultimately, he was empathetic, he was good, he helped children, he would sacrifice his life to help a kid, but at the end of the day, he masked a lot of that, and I think that was in his construction of his lightsaber too. I think that showed his different perspective as a Jedi, who are supposed to be more, empathetic monks.
Right.
He was more of a
Um,
crusader.
yeah, he was. Like, I don't think that he was not empathetic. Because I think that Jedi were, I don't know, it's weird that they're empathetic while also like being easily detached. It's almost like they detach from each other, but they have empathy for, I guess, like people in general. I don't know if they.
Yeah, like he didn't care about laying down the law or hurting anyone's feelings if it was for the greater good, especially at the times of the end of the Republic. He did sense a
Absolutely.
foreboding that in the Plagueis novel by James Luceno, it's revealed that Sidious's master Plagueis, his master Tenebrous, and his master the
Mm,
unnamed Twi'lek did a rift in the Force, sort of, and that's what clouded the vision of the Jedi. So it wasn't just the pride and the haughtiness, which was certainly there among all of them, Mace especially. They all have their
yeah.
flaws, but it was a Sith long game that really blocked that
Yeah.
out. So you do see that,
Yeah.
he was only dealing with the cards he was dealt.
Right? Like you definitely once you kind of know that dark side lore, you do understand like within that damn near like 100 year span, like 100 plus year span, nothing was in control of the Jedi. Like the long game was in place.
And with his Shatterpoint and premonitions, he sensed it for sure. He wasn't dumb,
Yeah, he
and
knew something
he
was
wasn't a
coming.
fool. He's like some bad shit's on the horizon. Some motherfuckers are about to, and that's what made him on edge, especially with Anakin. He sensed danger. Whereas Qui-Gon transcended that and could see the full picture and knew he was the chosen one. Mace just saw what he would be in the next 20 years, or so, next quarter century, not the next half century. Qui-Gon did trust prophecy and had a little bit more unorthodox views. That's discussed in this novel, which we can go into more, the canon version of Shatterpoint, The Glass Abyss. It's rigidity versus the rigidity of Mace versus the unorthodox views of Qui-Gon. But ultimately, it's from a certain point of view. That's what Star Wars is about, and it's good to have Mace's take on it all. He's a very interesting character as one dimensional as he may initially appear. He's got many dimensions.
Right. A great story that I also heard about, that I also read about in the canon of Mace Windu, was right before the Clone Wars started. Sometime sometime around like 42 to 50 BBY, before Mace was on the council, he went on not even a mission. He went on like a body retrieval assignment with Dooku. Like this is before Dooku fell to the dark side, before he was lured by Darth Sidious. They had to go retrieve the body of a fallen Jedi. Like a Jedi died. I did not write down the name of this planet or this Jedi. But they had to go retrieve the body of a dead Jedi, and when they got to the planet, Dooku was like, something smells funky. Like, this is weird. Like, how did this Jedi die? Starts this impromptu investigation, and they end up like working together and uncovering all this corruption. Because I guess him and Dooku were quite close. They ended up uncovering like this huge government conspiracy, and the Jedi had learned something they weren't supposed to know, so they got killed, and it like this whole hullabaloo ensued. A senator ended up dying apparently, and but they successfully like uncovered this plot and discovered why this Jedi died. And when they got back to Coruscant, I guess then because the Jedi who died had been a council member, and so they then offered Mace Windu that council seat, and that's how he got onto the Jedi Council. Was he took the place of this dead Jedi, and he even said to Dooku, because Dooku found it unfair. He was just like, "Well, it was my idea to even start poking our noses and shit. Like you didn't want to do anything. Like you just wanted to go and follow the rules and do what you were assigned to do." And Mace's response was probably like part of like their falling out, and like one of the many points of things that pushed Dooku away from the Jedi was is like, well, your actions like got a senator killed. And
Yeah.
it's like it's that black and white viewpoint of things that I was just like, oh man, like that is on the head. Like of like you don't even see. It's like, well, yeah, but what you did, like this bad thing happened, and it's
Well, it's
I
always
have
it's always what you're immediately confronting in this situation. I always tie it to the Green
right.
Goblin. I call it the Green Goblin conundrum when he's dropping Mary Jane or the busload of children. Who does Peter Parker save? Sometimes there's no good choice really there. You can weigh the different moralities, but with Mace, it was he addressed or approached every situation with, okay, what is the best good here? What is the most direct good? What is my dogma telling me? What does my gut and my connection to the force tell me? But he didn't mince words. His name itself is Mace, which implies a weapon or to actually assault someone, which he did. He would maim and mace. Windu, that was my name in Super Smash Brothers because you can only put five characters, so Windu fit. So I was always Windu.
Oh, that's
But
sweet.
psychologically, it was because I wanted to kick ass. That was the connection. I was like, Windu, he's forceful. He's a winner. The name win, victory. I also think of I'm sure it's been addressed on Reddit. Windu went out the window. Maybe that was a little George Lucas foreshadowing with some delicious punnery. But
Get
there's
the fuck out.
well, Mace did, but there's a lot to even his name really when you actually dig deep. Especially the Legends names, I think they did name the characters a bit better. They weren't just random gobbledygook sort of, but to a point where I don't know if you've ever seen this. I'll reenact it as best I can. Apologies to Jimmy Fallon, but you all should watch this on YouTube. It's when Jimmy Fallon was still a guest star on SNL in 1999 in the spring season before the movie came out. He was kind of uh, introducing Mace to the world. He's like, yeah, there's a new character called Mace Windu. And then he did the Eminem. He's like, my name is what? My name is who? My name is Chicken 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 Mace Windu. And that'll always burn in my
Stop.
brain.
That's great.
That got me
I want to
weird
go
for
find that
Phantom
now.
Menace.
I've
Yeah,
never seen that.
just look up Jimmy Fallon Mace Windu on YouTube, and it's a great. And I think that set the prequels for me because, in a way, he represented that order in that first scene when you see him in Phantom Menace, in Attack of the Clones when he was badass, where he had the purple lightsaber, killed Jango Fett, and at the end of Revenge of the Sith when he died, that was essentially the end of the Jedi Order. That was the shatter point. That was Palpatine and the Sith's revenge. That was the
Hmm.
first cut, the samurai cut, and then thereafter, his fall represents and his rigidity and that fall. He was one pillar of that castle falling down and collapsing, to ashes.
Yeah. Something something I think is really interesting, as I find everything interesting. If no one's ever noticed, that's my favorite word. I should get a thesaurus and find a new fucking word. Um, is Mace's, I guess the way that Mace almost stayed the same, but at the same time changed over the course of the Clone Wars. And I really want to touch on that because he upheld to it because his like inner monologue constantly was upholding like the institution that was the Jedi Order, like what the Jedi stood for, what the Jedi rules were. He wanted to follow the rules, but then suddenly there was this huge shift in what the rules were, and I find it very interesting how he really like because there's obviously the switch from the Jedi are peacekeepers to the Jedi are enforcers to now like they're generals in this war, leading this huge impromptu made army against this like again and becoming more political against this huge different political faction um essentially, and how he really fell into that role. I think his rigidity did lend well to being a military general. He is a pretty good one for someone who didn't want to be. Um, and because I think like the order and the discipline that he was already very used to lent itself well um to working with the clone troopers and kind of like assessing things in like that larger geopolitical situation. I think he lent himself well to being a politician. um
And that's fleshed out really well in the so basically for all you nerds out there, he has two main novels, Shatterpoint Legends, Glass Abyss canon, and then he has two canon Marvel comic one shots. Well, not one shots, but limited series. The first was Jedi of the Republic, Mace Windu. That's exactly what Kristine is talking about right now. That's when he's a general and when he's a leader, it's showing him as a war general, not a warmonger, but he was fighting a defensive war. But again, as he tells, you know, as he tells, I think it was Palpatine in Episode 2. He's like, "We're keepers of the peace. We're not warriors. We cannot fight a war," and that brings in the clones. But he's ultimately saying, that those are my limits. So you're seeing him push into the limits of war. You're seeing what it does to his psyche to go even beyond that and become what he says he's not, a warrior.
yeah. And I imagine that it really like shifted who he like what he felt he had at his core. Um because it was a change to the rules. Like it was a shift to everything that the Jedi were, and I can only imagine the internal struggle of that. Like just I don't know, because you see it so much with other characters, kind of how they process it. Like you see it a lot with Anakin, because of course he like wears his emotional turmoil on his sleeve, and we've like gone through so much of him. I think you kind of see how Obi-Wan deals with it, like honestly through like humor and charm, but also
More
very much like a
moderate
rule.
middle
Yeah,
path. Yeah.
like, but also still very much a rule follower. Definitely, but like in like a sassy way. Like he would like twist the rules a little
Right.
bit, but
For a little
definitely
zest,
not like
a little lemon. Yeah.
right. If like Anakin's like super wild and Mace is like super conservative, definitely
I was
Kenobi's
just gonna,
moderate.
I was actually gonna use the C word. I was gonna say Mace is a traditional conservative. He wants to
Yeah.
conserve the old Republic. He's not just a Jedi dogma guy, but he's actually a representation of the old Republic itself, which did
Yeah.
need to die through the cycles of through the yin and yang. You can go into Hinduism, the old needed to burn, and then a phoenix needed to rise from the ashes of
Hmm.
that and the empire to have a functional republic, a functional democracy through the new republic. The old republic had to die, even if there were 23 years of tyranny in between. It's not ideal. I never want that in my life. I know that, but or anyone's
Right.
life. But in a way, Mace didn't see that. He thought this old system, the old republic, can keep going because he was so conservative, not
Yeah.
realizing it did need a death and rebirth for that old system to happen again. It's kind of almost what Qui-Gon saw, because Qui-Gon was a big picture guy. He was a
Yeah.
let's zoom out, and that's
Yeah.
played so beautifully in the Glass Abyss, because you see, so these both take place, whereas the comics take place between episodes 2 and 3, I believe. At least one of them do, the limited series.
Hmm.
These both take place between episodes 1 and 2. So you're seeing, after Qui Gon died in this one, he's ultimately fulfilling his promise to go help out this planet. It's called, hold on, sorry, real quick. It all ties together, I
You sure?
promise.
Are you sure Shatterpoint? Oh yeah, no, Shatterpoint is after. Yeah, it's after
It's
Qui Gon
before,
dies.
because it's before the Clone Wars, right?
Yeah.
This other one is also before the Clone Wars. And
Yeah.
it involves coaxium. Oh no, that's the comic I'm mixing up. In the Glass Abyss, they go to Metagos, and this is where the spiritual starts to happen. So where Shatterpoint focuses on Harren Call going back to his home world and trying to save the one person who's kind of like a daughter to him in the summertime war. And then there's the dark side of the Force with Car Restore, and we can go into Ghost Windu, all that stuff. But in the Glass Abyss, that focuses also on the spiritual, the Force Ghost, almost the living Force. It goes into what Qui Gon saw, and it was a clash of rigidity and a clash of, kind of improv, really. So you're seeing Mace confront these this catch 22 sort of, and grow a bit. He's growing, even though it's towards the end of his life. You're seeing him as a Jedi, challenge his beliefs and his relationship to the Force itself, as he's fighting this kind of, it's kind of an anti-colonial world. The Glass Abyss goes into that, but we can get more into that later.
I definitely like seeing that shift in who he is and like what his I guess what his values are. Like I and like how his relationships change. Like in Shatterpoint, how really like the enemy he's going to confront is his former Padawan,
Yeah,
which I always find like it interesting when you have like that master Padawan relationship, because it is like it's really the deepest relationship that you're gonna get with the Jedi.
which you don't really
Like
see in
it
the movies with him too. So you get that fleshed
exactly
out.
you don't even know he spent so much time on the council. You don't even consider the fact that like these masters have had Padawans. Like they've essentially
Yeah.
they've raised these children.
Well, you do
Like
see
whether
her, Deepa Bilaba. I guess she has the bindi, the space bindi. She's supposed to represent India
oh
here.
yeah.
So you do see her in the movies. She appears in I believe episode 2 at the very least. But you don't know the connection until you go into the expanded
Yeah,
universe.
into right, isn't that always the way?
It is. Oh no, actually, she first did appear in the Phantom Menace. Yeah, sorry, the Phantom Menace she was in, which makes sense because she's young looking. That's the time when she would be in that. She was in Attack of the Clones.
Was she in the council scenes? I'm trying to
Um,
think. Like
I,
it sounds
I,
familiar.
I don't remember exactly. I would have to go back, but she's in 1. She is in 2, and she was cut from three, but she made it in Shatterpoint, and she was in the Revenge of the Sith novelization. So she did.
Uh,
She was pretty much I think killed at the Purge, the Order 66.
rough
Um,
day.
rough. I need to confirm that, but ultimately, yeah, that's what Shatterpoint is. You can continue. Sorry.
No, no, it's fine. I just find it interesting, especially when you have like one or the other will then like fall to the dark side. Like they had this like change in ideology and perspective. Um and so in Shatterpoint I can like just the turmoil of knowing like I raised this child and like this is really where they've shifted to, like so far away. I don't want to say to evil because you know my perspective on the dark side. Like
A
go take
different point of view, yes, from a certain
it
point of view.
is just a different point of view. Like that her ideology had shifted so far from his center, and that was and how jarring that must have been for somebody who really lived and died by what they believed, by their right and wrong. And so he's probably looking at her like,
Who is this,
what
right?
did you do? Like, who is this? Like, where's the little boy I carried?
Well, actually, I'm actually just to clear up her life. Yeah, she ends up in a coma in a box tank, and then just her fate's kind of up in the air in the legends. But she does die in the Order 66 in the Purge. She did not make any canon, but even though her consciousness didn't remain in legends, she did actually continue to live, even though there was that legacy that it was for Mace's character growth. She was kind of a deuteragonist or an antagonist in that regard, but it did deepen Mace's relationship with the Force because here's someone who he was in charge of and who was in his charge, and he felt that he failed her.
Right. I mean, which is a pretty constant theme in Star Wars. I mean, hello, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. Same.
everybody thought they failed somebody.
Right, and in a way, maybe he's not wrong, but that shows him too that not everything is guaranteed. What the Jedi say isn't always going to turn out that way. You have to kind of expand your vision a bit, like Qui-Gon did in one regard.
Right. I mean, it's kind of I guess like any parent-esque relationship, where you may at some point feel like, did I fail my child? Did I do something wrong? Like you're like I said, you look at Kenobi and Anakin, and for my favorite Star Wars scene of all time, you have um Anakin as Vader telling Obi-Wan in the Obi-Wan show, like, I'm not your failure, Obi-Wan. Like, you didn't kill Anakin Skywalker like I did.
I did.
Like don't internalize this. Like this was gonna happen with or without you. And I guess it's kind of how you have to maybe sometimes look at it as a parent. Sometimes, because don't get me wrong, parents can inflict a lot of trauma on their kids, especially when you're bringing them to war and raising them to be child soldiers. That's a
Has a
whole
v
question.
has a Vietnam aspect too. We were watching that TikTok video on Shatterpoint and how it's kind of him in Vietnam. It's the jungle world,
Yeah.
being raised to become warriors, and for what? For a system that ultimately kind of is on its way out. Really, you could say the beginning of the death of the American Empire began really with the military-industrial complex of the Vietnam War, and I thought that was kind of expertly captured by Matthew Stover in the Shatterpoint novel.
Yeah, no, all really excellent fleshings out
Fleshing outs.
of
Or, yeah.
fleshing.
If it's passersby, maybe it's fleshing out. No, fleshing outs
uh,
because it would be a conjoined noun. Yeah.
thank you, my local English major.
Anytime.
Um, I think they're really good looks at Mace Windu's life outside of like I could think the usual context that we usually have, of just like him as a general in the Clone Wars, where he's like kind of a side story. He's not even the main story throughout Clone Wars. I think he gets like what, one or two episodes like by himself.
Yeah, as much as Jar
And
Jar, really. Yeah, he doesn't.
right, that's just Jar Jar.
But it kind of speaks to it. You didn't need to really. He was kind of a behind the scenes character, and it was still fleshed out just through his
Right.
little interactions, even if it was one scene.
Right, and that's the best part about the novels and the comics is you get those deeper looks at characters that you wouldn't otherwise get on screen or that we haven't otherwise got. Hashtag Where's the Windu show?
Yeah.
Um, talking to you, Dave. Talking to you, Filoni. Where's the Mace Windu show? We all know he's alive.
The
Um,
Fresh Prince of Coruscant. That'll be the great premise.
um, but I am excited. I'm excited to flesh out really the themes of control and the post-trauma response that we really see, like that really plays out throughout Mace Windu's life, like from the beginning of his life with his Shatterpoint visions all the way through to his like battle with Palpatine, and kind of how he almost throws the Jedi book out the window, and his like overlying sense of justice really comes to the forefront of his actions in that moment of like when Anakin's like, no, he needs to stand trial, we have to capture him, and Windu's like, no, he needs to die. Like, he can't be allowed to live, which honestly is a Shatterpoint in and of itself. And I think it's just really poignant to, I guess, who he was in the end. That yes, he was raised by the Jedi Order and raised to follow a code, but then it's almost like a nature versus nurture, which is always obviously a big theme within Star Wars. That he was nurtured and raised to be this Jedi and follow this code, but also needed to feel safe with this sense of control. And he's like, I can't control this guy. Like, I can't control the situation. So like
Don't like it.
definitively, like he has to die.
Order. Yes.
Like, right? With an iron fist. But I'm excited to get Gil's perspective on kind of how that control then feels in real life, and kind of what people will do for that control to feel that sense of safety.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, because it's very multidimensional too, and a lot of it's beneath the surface.
And welcome back. And we are very excited because we are joined by Mr. Gilbert Barjon, who is our highly esteemed mental health guest for this exciting episode. Gilbert is a highly regarded nurse practitioner whose career bridges urgent care, medicine, neurosurgery, oncology, and now psychiatric mental health. With advanced training from several prestigious institutions, including world-renowned Ivy League programs, Gilbert brings a rare breadth of expertise to the table. He's currently completing his second master's degree in psychiatry as a nurse practitioner, deepening his commitment to understanding and treating the complexities of the human mind. Thank you for joining us tonight, Gilbert. We're very excited to have you.
Appreciate it.
Wow, such a great introduction. Thank you.
Well, what can I say? I made that up off the top of my head, don't you know?
We do
We're
appreciate
very
your time and expertise, though. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm excited. I've known you for several years now, and knew about that you were a neurosurgeon nurse, which is already like impressive as fuck. But when I heard that you got more into the mental health space, I was like, that will be a very interesting point of view. Just somebody who not only is looking at the, I guess, the personality, like effects side, but also really understands like the science and the medical side, like knowing that a tumor sitting on your cerebral cortex or your frontal lobe is going to change how
Your balance.
yeah, like your personality and like how like you see the world, and that like, I mean, the brain is really the center, and I feel like you understand that better than most.
I love the brain, and then also love what you guys are doing. I think this is like such a cool concept, and once I saw it, like I was just like so excited to be a part of it. So thank you guys for having me.
Thank
Oh, of
you. And all,
course.
all credit due Christine for coming up with it and putting the passion into to make this a reality.
This is my brain baby. I have a real baby now, but this was my first baby. My second, if you count my dog as my first one, whose name is
Three
Yoda.
babies.
Oh yes,
Yoda,
I
yeah.
have I have three babies. There's Yoda, mine the Forest, and now
Yeah.
Ariel. um, I'm really excited to get your perspective on Mace Windu. As always, we'll get into the scenario that we sent to Gilbert, as we are wont to do, as that is my phrase of the evening. Um, so you'll know kind of what we are going to parse out. But first, I must ask Gilbert, what is your relationship with Star Wars?
Relationship with Star Wars. That's a great question. Obviously, the original Star Wars. Help me here, guys. When I say original Star Wars, that's the one that everybody is most common with, and that's the one of Darth Vader, Star Wars 4. I remember seeing that, obviously, like everybody else on Channel 9, UPN, something like that on the
Wow.
weekend. And I was like, this is a pretty cool movie. I actually had a lightsaber that was pretty cool. As I got older, the Star Wars with uh, who was the guy with the black and red face? He
Oh,
had the
Darth
Darth
puppet.
Maul.
Maul.
Yes.
Where's that bad boy? Here's that bad
So
boy.
now when that
This
starts,
guy.
yes, him.
This yeah. This is our podcast mascot.
That's so awesome. So now
Yeah.
when
No.
that
The
so now when that Star Wars came out, I was like, hold up, is this going backwards or forward? And then that led me to watch all of the movies in order to understand how everything happened, and here we are now. So I actually do have a fair concept of what Star Wars is, and I do know the characters to some degree, and I did geek out in like my late teens on Star Wars. I just think it was written so beautifully, like all the complexities, all the different character developments. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah,
I mean, we can't help but agree.
this is why we're here.
This is why we're here. That it is a beautifully fleshed out A to Z story with every imaginable influence across religions and cultures and time and perspectives, and it's great.
Psychologies too, yeah.
I like how you
And
said religion
psychology.
because I'll definitely touch up on my perspective on how religion is a big factor of like Star Wars in a way.
The living
Oh
force.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
There's
oh yeah,
all
no, we at some point have to do an entire series
the
on
dogma.
like the different religions. Like I feel like each religion can get its own episode.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly.
Even like the witches of Dathomir, you can go into
Yeah, yeah,
that
no,
too.
you have cultism, you have Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism,
Everything. Hindu,
Hindu,
Tao.
everything.
The yin and yang, the Sith and Jedi is probably the
Wow.
closest to Taoism too. I think they compare it to that, but they call them Buddhist or Christian monks too. But it's really everything melded together. I love that element because you have the government, you have the old republic, you have the empire, the new republic, but and it makes it a real galaxy. It brings these different dimensions into this setting, and it's very convincing.
Mace Windu's story is shaped by early exposure to chaos and a lifelong pursuit of order. As a child on Harun Kal, he experienced precognitive force visions, flashes of destruction and betrayal that made the future feel like a threat. For Windu, control became a form of protection. When brought to the Jedi Temple, he clung to structure and detachment, excelling in philosophy and combat while struggling with emotional intimacy. This need for discipline hardened into dogma. His mastery of Vapad, a lightsaber form that channeled darkness without succumbing to it, reflected his internal struggle, walking the edge without falling. But in cultivating such rigid control, he became emotionally closed off, even to his fellow Jedi. By the time he confronted Chancellor Palpatine, Windu had come to believe that the only decisive action could stop the unraveling of the Republic. He moved to strike not out of hate, but conviction. In that moment, he abandoned the Jedi ideal of justice without favor, trading principle for perceived necessity. His clarity became blindness, unable to see Anakin's conflict or acknowledge the possibility of another path. His actions helped set in motion the fall of the Jedi and the rise of the Empire. Kind of like looking at that large overarching view of Mace. What were your initial thoughts? What were your initial thoughts with this, Gilbert?
I'll probably break it down, starting from the beginning. It didn't seem like he had the best childhood. It didn't seem like his upbringing was, the easiest upbringing. He didn't grow into like any kind of royalty or anything like that, right?
Mm-mm. No,
Right.
he was just
Jedi Master.
yeah, he's just a kid he was just a kid on this planet. But then of course, Jedi, of course, younglings are taken from their families toddlers.
Mm, I
So
see.
he would have had very little time on his home planet. He was raised by the Jedi.
Got it. Got it. So yeah, so I can only imagine that kind of like trauma, kind of having like kind of leaving your home place and getting taken away, can cause some degree of trauma to like a child. And it seemed as if like he didn't know much ways to live other than the Jedi way, since he was taken so young. As it seems like for him, what I'm seeing is that his sense of control was like his discipline. It was like the way that he knew how to live, and it was the Jedi way. Where us, it seems like in our life we have many different eras and many different ways of living. We can be bought into a form of religion, or we can learn how to live from our parents. But it seems like for Mace Windu, he was taught the Jedi way. And maybe it did elicit some kind of response, and where he felt as if you grow up in some kind of danger, he may rely on some control to feel safe. And the safety that he connects to is like the Jedi way was like his safe control. So I can only imagine like if you're like taught one way and like this straight line of living in this like really disciplined way, like how can you see other different perspectives and other ways of living? There's one major theme that I see that kind of plays into what happens in his like trajectory and his story.
I think that something I would really like to, I guess, focus on, at least in the beginning, especially within his childhood, is the fact that like he was having these force visions, these precognitive visions. And
Mm-hmm.
from what I've seen described, they would be they're called shatter points, and they would be really like the like things coming to a head, like points of like destruction, like bad things happening, very violent.
Premonition, sort
And
of.
yeah, and to have those as a child, like even somewhere as controlled as the Jedi, even somewhere as controlled as the Jedi Temple would be very jarring, and then really cultivated his feeling of safety within that control.
Yeah.
Like being that outside of these premonitions, he felt he had to control everything because he couldn't control like what was happening in
Mm-hmm.
these visions. Or I can't even imagine, especially as a young child, even controlling when the visions come on. I'm sure that came with time, with meditation, and his stronger connection to the Force. But that's me guessing. Um,
You're
how
pretty
he
spot on.
would, I think of like a child in a situation where they had very little control, and how that trauma response would come about through growing up, how you would seek control for safety. And I guess if you can, I guess, speak a little bit to that.
Okay, well, if you think about nightmares, some trauma responses, nightmare can sometimes be a symptom of a trauma response. You can, kind of have dissociations, which is kind of like feeling like you're there, but you're not really there because you're so deep into like a trauma. And then sometimes people who suffer from trauma also have like really bad nightmares. They can't go to sleep because they keep reliving something traumatic. But we can also say that's a part of, did he suffer from some kind of anxiety where there was so much going on in this world. The battle of good and evil was a continuum, constant theme of Star Wars. And, maybe he had a lot on his shoulder, to be the future Jedi and to take on all this responsibility. And he soon became a Jedi Master. So sometimes we can see, main thing in a lot of trauma, people can have these kind of nightmares, and it seems like that's what he may, could have been, having, or maybe he had superhuman psychic powers that he can see the future.
Right.
That's kind of, I kind of
Not
see.
enough literature or science to back that one up. But,
But in the science fantasy world, because Star Wars is ultimately science fiction and fantasy, so I call it science fantasy. It really, that's you hammer the nail on the head there,
mhm.
because he has that trauma, and that's kind of how he compartmentalized, how he kind of deals with it. But he also was exceptional to get on the Jedi, Council. Certain characters like Mace, Anakin, among others, they have almost a supernatural power on top of a supernatural force that makes it like an expression of the force in a very unique way. And you see that especially in the Legends novels a lot. So I think it's both. Is just going to be my 2 cents.
Would you guys say that Mace Windu, the big topic in psychology now, we love talking about attachment styles, right? Um, so what I'm getting from his story is that he wasn't really the easiest to kind of form relationships. One can say that did Mace Windu exhibit some like avoidant attachment styles? As I kept reading, the scenario and kind of going through a lot of things that you guys said and listening to everything, it's like he excelled at so many things, right? He was good in independence. He was good in philosophy. He was good in his combat skills. But it seems like he struggled with emotional intimacy with some of the other characters, and then struggled so much with connecting with some of the other Jedis that he couldn't see something that happened that like changed the whole trajectory of like Star Wars. Not seeing a pivotal person like Anakin, right? And maybe playing a factor in stopping him from going to like the dark side or something along those lines. So one can wonder, did he suffer from some kind of avoidant like attachment because of how rigid he grew up, or maybe because of something that happened in his childhood with abiding such a strict code? So that's one of the thoughts that kind of like are themes that kind of stood out to me.
Yeah, I mean, Jedi in general are really brought up to be quite emotionally detached, and um, I think that's probably something that appealed quite deeply to Mace, as he was already quite, like you said, like emotionally avoidant. Like he didn't really form like a lot of relationships, even like with the other Jedi. I did read that he found Yoda's not really warmth, but he found his humor to not really like suit him well. I mean, which is also why Yoda's not Windu's Jedi Master.
Yeah.
He trained him like he trained all the other younglings, but I believe his Jedi Master's name was Tasa, which is a really cool name to pronounce. And I think just complimented Mace's, I guess, quiet power a little more than Yoda's like witty wisdom.
And, another thing too, that would you say like the Jedi way? Because I feel like as a Jedi, there's such a strict path. It's kind of like you have to be like in a way perfect. Like you can't be bad. You have to be like good. You have to follow this code. You have to follow this way. If you deviate a little bit, then you might be turned to the dark side. So I think that it seemed that Mace Windu could have picked up a lot of that, like just trying to be like this perfect person, being deep in your combat skills, being very intelligent, understanding this like way of the Jedi. But it is just so rigid, like such a rigid way of like living, and it leaves like little room to feel like empathetic or have like emotional flexibility. A lot of times in psychology or psychiatry, a lot of things can occur when we're so emotionally rigid. Like it's very difficult for us to kind of adapt or be more flexible with our emotions. If you think of somebody who suffers from like really bad anxiety.
I do
Sort,
wonder if Mace suffered from anxiety. They never mentioned that.
well, it's kind of like a, an immovable object meets an unstoppable force sort of thing. It creates that kind of shatter point, that trauma with him, I think, because he's so rigid that he can't adapt to change as easily, I think. But it makes him super effective in one way and super flawed in another.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, the Jedi don't leave a lot of room for emotional flexibility. And honestly, anytime, it's kind of like any religion. Anytime you bring up any kind of like doubts or anxieties or question things, it's kind of like pray on it. The force will guide you. Just meditate, you'll be fine. Like don't question those emotions too much. It's not the Jedi way.
But I wonder how he felt where he had channeled a little bit of the dark side, to master Vapad, right?
Yeah.
Like his form of like, so it's kind of like he was walking on this like thin line of like darkness, while being so rigid.
Yeah.
So maybe, he wasn't as rigid as we think. He did have to channel a little bit of the dark side to get to a certain point of his mastery.
I think that, and that's one of the things
Or if I can
I
explain.
like about Mace is that because he is very pragmatic,
Mhm.
that he was able to see that there is power to be had in the dark side, and sometimes you need to take that little extra step, like that little like dip your toe like into the dark side lake, pond, puddle, to really like reap the benefits of that like, oh, because like, I mean, really what the dark side is, it's very raw power. And I mean, what the use of the dark side trade for that power is up for ethical debate. I do like that he was able to walk that line. I think that, like, I don't think that is what was part of his downfall. Honestly, I think if he had leaned into that rare flexibility more, that actually probably would have been to his benefit. That's just me.
To go with the punch, roll with the punches a little bit more.
Exactly, like not be so rigid. It's one of the few unrigid things that he did was incorporate some dark side elements into the Vapad fighting style. Because other than that, he was too rigid. Like he was too rigid with his viewpoint of Anakin. Like he was too rigid. In the end, um, with his viewpoint of like Chancellor Palpatine's fate, which ended up not really working out for him because he got blasted out that window. As you mentioned before, James, Windu went out the window,
Yeah,
which
a little pun.
I love. We're gonna put that on a
Ma-
t-shirt.
maimed window. That's
And
his new name.
Shut the fuck up. You kill me, James. You absolutely kill me. Like,
Sorry.
yeah.
Well, in like a therapy way, we can say that he was constantly trying to regulate his own shadow, right? Like, was it like sometimes we can say that like did he deny or like suppress like parts of himself? And maybe to discover parts of himself, he had to connect with a little bit of the dark side. Um, so sometimes we have to see our shadows, to be able to like get to another place. Kind of like when you hear like, fighting your demons, or just kind of pulling out, opening the closet and dealing with that stuff that we don't want to deal with to get to a better place. So maybe that was like his form or a kind of symbolism for that, right? Like, let me deal with some of this stuff, let me open up a little bit of this darkness. And, he was able to channel something with that. It was unfortunate how he got blasted by Palpatine, um, but he was just so rigid in his ways, and he didn't really do well with that.
And he didn't have the presence of mind to realize Anakin was a threat there because he was so rigid. He said Jedi versus Sith. He didn't realize the threat had already
Yeah,
shifted over to Anakin because he couldn't see beyond sort of what was in front of him because the dark side, as we discussed earlier, does cloud the vision through earlier Sith. They purposely gave tunnel vision to the Jedi, and because of Mace's already narrow perspective in that regard, it was his foil and his flaw. But I was reading too in the James Luceno novel, The Plagueis, to become a true Sith, you have to get zapped with Force lightning. So I think that Palpatine recognized in his own transformation, that's when Anakin became Vader and when Palpatine became really Sidious, he needed someone as powerful as Mace to inflict that Force lightning back at him. It couldn't be self-inflicted. So to become like this Voldemort-like character, he saw Mace as a crucible. He saw Mace as his powerful equal as a Jedi, and that speaks volumes for who Mace was in that regard. That rigidity, it needed to bounce back at him.
Yeah, no, I think he definitely saw Mace Windu as a threat. Like Sidious felt very, like he didn't feel threatened by many Jedi, but definitely Qui-Gon was a threat, Windu was a threat, and like Yoda was a problem.
Yeah.
Everyone else is cannon fodder. Like those three Jedi, he fucking murked before
Mace,
Windu even got in the room.
Mace gave him more of a run for his money than Yoda did, but then again, it could be argued that he sort of was playing with Mace to let Anakin complete both of their transformations, but that's
Right.
arguable.
Right. A lot of points we could flesh out on that scene.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that Mace, was lacking, a lot of like insight? Like he was unable to really see his like issues or his problems because he was just so rigid.
Oh, definitely.
Psychologically,
Like
Definitely.
insight is a big thing in like, when we talk about psychology.
Yeah. I absolutely think so, because if he could do that, then he would have considered Anakin's perspective more. He wouldn't have kept him at such an arm's length. He would have seen the bigger picture going on around him sooner. I think that he was so focused on keeping the like the rules of the Jedi Order, and so focused on really like the rules of engagement with war. Because like, gotta remember, like
Yeah.
at the when everything comes to a head in Revenge of the Sith, like they're literally at in the last like 2% of the Clone Wars, which he's been like a very active like top general for. He's been dealing with the political side, and he's been dealing with like leading his clone trooper regiment, and like finding all this balance. And then you find out, oh, there's like a Sith Lord somewhere who's like manipulating all of us. Like, now we have to find him. And when he does,
it's too late.
he's just like, yeah, it's too late. And he's just like, eliminate the problem, like make the problem go away, and not like, let's
Yeah,
have him stand trial, let's capture
stab,
him. Like, stab, stab.
jab.
In a lot of
Like,
time,
pew pew. Um,
in a
and
lot of times,
no, continue.
we can, in a lot of times we can see, as like an identifier of how severe a mental illness is. We look at a lot of insight, right? Like, do you know that there's something wrong, right? Like a lot of personality disorders, like we are unable to kind of like they're unable to identify like that there's something wrong with them, that something is going on. So huge, right? To have like insight, right? If somebody is, going through something mentally, like I need help, I need to talk to somebody. So maybe if Mace Windu had a little bit more insight, he could have, counseled the Jedi. He could have had, a different perspective. He could have, spoke to them to like get a different like vision on what was happening, to prevent everything else that happened because he was able to not have like the
Right.
proper insight.
Do
You
you
know,
feel that his because we discussed this earlier, that he is very traditional in his values, and do you think that that traditional kind of unwillingness to yield to either a different perspective or an alternative path, essentially being really stuck in his ways,
yeah.
um just didn't it almost didn't allow him to see the bigger picture until it was too late?
So I think, when you look at like his personality trait, or you look at his form of rigidity, um, you can kind of say that he had a psychological like toll of like emotional suppression. Like he was unable to feel a lot of things, unable to connect with a lot of people. He exhibited a lot of hyper control. Like he wanted to be in control of so much things that it blinded him from other things that was happening. And it led to his unfortunate demise. But also, bringing it back to like real world context. When we're so rigid, it lacks us from embracing. I think sometimes rigidity is not ideal, and the reason being is because like imperfection is okay. Like within imperfections, we can learn more about ourselves. We can seek for help, we can seek for counsel, we can seek for guidance, and it's okay to be uncertain. And it's okay to not have full control of everything. And I think that's something that Mace Windu lacked a lot. Like the okay not to be okay. And I think that in his mind, he felt the sense of like he had to always be okay. I don't know if you guys can agree with that.
No,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
I really thought it was. Sorry, you go, Christine. Sorry.
um no, I was just gonna say, and I kind of just had this thought that, growing up, he would have been just like every other Padawan and like learning from his master. But when he was then appointed to the council and eventually worked his way up in power to essentially be second in command in the Jedi, really only second to Yoda, and everyone just really saw Yoda as like this perfect, like wise, almost like Buddha like character, who's 900 years old. So you are really holding yourself up to this 900-year-old ideal. um so you really think like, well, I don't see any faults in Yoda, like I can't have any faults. Like there was, I mean, really with the Jedi, there's not a lot of space for flaws, and I feel like Windu already held himself from a young age up to this like impossible standard, of needing control to feel the safety, to keep himself safe. Um, but then as an adult, needing to live up to this ideal that, I mean, I don't think that just he was upholding, that everyone around him was upholding. And I'm sure that, I mean, that obviously didn't serve him well in the end. And I think that as we flesh out like the expanded universe and legends and lore more, we learn how imperfect Yoda was, and how that was part of the hubris that led to the overall fall of the Jedi.
Yeah,
Mm.
it wasn't just the dark side clouding everything. It was their own flaws, because had they, been more perfect beings, they could have stood up against that force and seen it coming, but they fell right into Palpatine's trap. Really, the Sith's long game trap, which was 1,000 years in the making. What did someone like Mace, what chance did he stand really with his traumas against a millennium of coordinated flexibility, patience? He had certain good elements, but him, even Yoda, they couldn't stand up against it, and their traumas, I don't think, made it easier. But
It's
to,
almost a
to
bit of narcissism.
yeah, no, that was definitely fleshed out in the prequels too. But to
Yeah.
tie this all in too, while also mentioning the other expanded universe properties we can get to, the the Glass Abyss, which is about him confronting flexibility through the form of Qui Gon's ghost. That's Force Ghost. This is after Phantom Menace, so he's very much starting to see the spiritual element, the life thereafter, sort of the Jedi Order and the Old Republic just crumbling, and he knows it's coming, but he's so rigid he's gonna go down with the ship in like Titanic, where Qui Gon's trying to be more flexible, and also in the Twilight Run, the recent limited series comic series by Marvel Comics, he's interacting with a woman too as well, and you're seeing his softer side. What's her name? Azita Cruz. I guess she's a
Mm-hmm.
Mexican, and they're chasing Coaxium Ultra, so that ties into the Han
Yeah.
Solo. So you're starting to see his softer side, and he, with children, with innocence, he'll always protect them and jump in front of a blaster, I guess, laser blast. So he's really, in individual situations, he's willing to yield a little bit and show that, but on a dogmatic political cultural level, he's very much an immovable object, and I think that is his flaw in the end. I think that's why he gets moved, out the window, because he doesn't expect that force to come and hit him, and that's what Qui Gon, I think, is trying to warn him about. It's a clash of dogmas. He's saying, I need a little correction here. We got to dial you down, and ultimately Mace's hubris, I think, rejects that, or his trauma won't allow him to accept that.
Yeah, I think you can like kind of that's I think that's very well said. And you touched on something, Kristen, when you spoke about like that they have some kind of like narcissistic traits. When you think of any kind of narcissism falls under like a personality type disorder. When you think about that, you think about his ego. So I wonder what relationship he had with his ego. He definitely had a super ego. Where he couldn't see himself. He, he couldn't see himself in the role of which he was. He saw himself like he couldn't like step out of himself, and sometimes we need to, and that's pretty much what self awareness is being able to kind of like look at yourself and say, all right, what's happening? But when we're so fixed into our ego controls the narrative, and I think he had just a lack of awareness of his ego, and what was happening. We can't control our ego, but we can be aware of our ego, and I think that he had very sucky awareness of his ego. Um, I think a common theme that happens in Star Wars is, how we can kind of compare the religion aspect or the Jedi aspect to like a religious kind of like aspect, right? From what I was, kind of reading and looking at different themes, we can say that for Mace, the Force was almost like a religion for him. It gave him a form of structure and meaning, to his life when he didn't have any other kind of meaning, right? He was just, taken and he was taught to be a Jedi. He really had no other way, This was kind of his life, and this is his cards that he was dealt with. Like many of us, right? We don't really have a lot of options sometimes, and sometimes, we got to just play whatever cards that we're dealt with. And I think that was kind of like his case. Like, he was just stuck to be a Jedi. Obviously, he could have went to the dark side, but he didn't allow himself to do that because he was so rigid. But, hiding behind a form of being a Jedi, it seems like they don't have a lot of vulnerability, right? Because a Jedi is supposed to be like this like perfect individual. So there was no sense of vulnerability. And how can we get better if there's no vulnerability? How can some other people help us if there's no vulnerability? If we're so much in our ego of ourselves and of being our perfect selves, there's little room for like help. There's little room for therapy. If I think that Gilbert is perfectly fine, Gilbert is a Christian and there's nothing wrong with me, and I'm the best in the world because I followed this way. But no, I'm imperfect. I sin. There is wrong, and I think that is the issue with like the Jedi way, that there is no wrong. Wrong is the dark side. But I guess you can look at religion the same way, right? Wrong is hell. Anything that you do, it's bad. But it seems like there's less forgiving culture in the Jedi way compared to like other religions, I guess you can say.
Nail on the head. It's one of my biggest issues with the Jedi. The very, very inflexible.
Well, especially towards the end where they kick out Ahsoka.
Of the Force.
Right. And she's like, I don't even want your stupid order back. Good for you. Good for you, girl.
They're showing they're not the perfect ideal that they were. Even
he definitely struggled with trust and surrender.
Yeah, so as we wrap up in the next few minutes, Gil, we would be very remiss if we did not bring up what we discussed is really an interesting difference, particularly with Samuel L. Jackson's portrayal of Mace Windu, which we are all very fond of. Despite what anyone feels about the prequels, everyone I think can universally agree that Samuel Jackson is fucking great.
Even the prequel haters do love his performance.
Right? You can't beat it. Then we got purple lightsabers. We talked earlier about the interesting, I guess juxtaposition between like the character perception and audience perception. Because of course, being in a world where there's humans of like humanoids on like hundreds of planets and aliens and different species, Mace Windu being black wasn't really a thing. Like it wasn't an issue. Like he was a human, which obviously separated him out from other aliens and species, but essentially he was from Harun Kal. He was a humanoid from Harun Kal, and that's what mattered. But of course, audience perception, he's like this generation's singular black character in Star Wars, of which James pointed out, there's always one.
Per trilogy.
We have one per trilogy. We have Lando Calrissian, we have Samuel L. Jackson, and we have Finn, whose actor name I'm completely spacing on.
John Boyega.
Thank you. I think it's such an important point of representation, especially in science fiction. And I guess as a young boy who was watching Star Wars, like what did that mean to you? Like did that I guess paint his character in a different light? Did it paint his performance in a different light for you? And especially now knowing his struggles and the traumas that he was, I guess, really going through as a larger character, what do you feel about that?
I think I'm going to open this one with, the way that we saw, and this is extreme. Please don't cut this. Anyway,
okay, go for it.
The way that we see Obama as our like first black president, right? It was so cool to see like Samuel L. Jackson as a black character in
the first Black Jedi. That's
it was just like you have this. Exactly. Like exactly. I was
Yeah.
like, yes, Samuel L. Jackson, here we go. I was so happy to see that.
That was cool.
Yeah.
And
True,
what
because
did that mean to
Lando's a
me?
scoundrel, like literally a scoundrel.
But also, I think what is beautiful is that, being a black man, I think a lot of times the characters that we looked up to, and a lot of the movies that we saw growing up, sometimes maybe wasn't always as wise. Maybe what they portrayed black men to be sometimes was sometimes maybe a little bit irrational, a little bit wild. But I think it was very beautiful to adapt his character and to make him a very disciplined person, to make him a man of control, to make him a man of wisdom. And I think for me, I think when I was exposed to Star Wars, it probably was like maybe 14, 15, something along those lines. It showed me like, wow, like I can be disciplined, So I can only imagine like a lot of other young kids watching that, did that change their perspective of like, we can be disciplined, we can be wise, we can change the narrative, we can have a position of power. So I think that was really beautiful to see. And Samuel Jackson in that role had a lot of control. A lot of the roles, there's a snake on the plane,
Oh, I forgot about
or
that.
like
That
he is
You
Fuck
motherfucker!
the snakes with these
You
motherfucking planes.
motherfucker. Like,
Motherfucking
you know,
snakes! Motherfucking plane!
Right now all he says is this party's
so
over.
to see him in his role,
Right? Or him as right? Or he's like Uncle Ruckus ass character in Django.
he wasn't comic relief. Like he was like a very
He
like
was serious.
important
He
character,
Yeah.
and I think that was a really great role for Samuel Jackson.
both
Because for a long time, if you think about Samuel Jackson as like a person, all his characters, very much comic relief. A
Yeah.
lot of his characters were not serious characters.
Yeah.
And to see him in this role,
they dialed.
like you were expecting him to like have some comic relief, and you're like, he's gonna say something funny, and you're like, oh nah, he's serious.
I still think he's.
like, you're like,
He's
oh
a
wow,
serious
he's,
guy.
I'm not even like
he's a serious guy in here.
I'm not even exaggerating. I think that's his best role, like his most new. Because we have 3 movies with him. It's his most nuanced. Yeah, there was Glass too, but this is more. This went really deep into like. There's books about it. There's comic books like, and Samuel Jackson and George Lucas should be accredited because honestly, like Lucas created the character and Sam Jackson brought him to life, like together, and with that racial element too. Yeah, they made it for me as a 9-year-old just so natural, organic. Someone you look up to, someone really cool. Like in Phantom Menace, he's like, which one did we destroy, the master or the apprentice? Like, I like the way he thought, and he was just sitting there with his, with his fingers together and saying, "No, the boy is too old." Like he was the one who kind of set Anakin on that. He set things in motion. He was a pivotal character for me, and that really stuck with me. Like when I stepped out of the movie as a 9-year-old, it made it feel real. Like his performance really made that movie, which everyone hates, I guess. But and this book too, the Glass Abyss, this and Shatterpoint do go into race and war. Vietnam War is the Shatterpoint, military industrial complex. But there's anti-colonialism. There's elements of race and like kind of sticking together against. I think they're called the San, this species in Metagos, and they're fighting like this enemy that's trying to oppress them, and it's kind of nuanced. They don't really address it so much that he's a black character, but this is one novel where they do show that dimension and flesh it out. I think it came out 2023, 2024, so it's pretty recent.
I would also like to say Mace Windu was portrayed by Samuel Jackson, who had tremendous swag in the Jedi. And he had the purple lightsaber.
Lean. It was lean.
Yes.
He had the purple lightsaber.
That was
He
great.
said he told Lucas that's one of my few
That's my color.
things. Like, can I have a purple lightsaber? Lucas
A
was like,
purple
"Fuck yeah, you
lightsaber.
can."
It was like, whoa.
It was
And
the
it-
grape
and-
touch. I love it.
Not the grape touch. I love a grape touch. I think James, you mentioned earlier that inclusion of like such a unique color really blew open the spectrum of color on lightsabers. They went from being like red, green, and blue.
They did the whole rainbow
to,
after.
to now they have everything. Now they have especially in the Old Republic
Yellow,
stories
white.
that came later on. All of them, right? You have
gold.
Ahsoka's white, red, white, white lightsaber. Wow, it's hard to say. Yeah, you have orange, you have yellow, like you
Yeah,
have
gold,
like the whole rainbow.
white. I would want a gold, purple, and red. So I would want like a three. That's what I would want. Like I want a three,
Like a rainbow pop.
like Wolverine, yeah, but very badass, you know.
And-
Sorry,
but
all my lightsabers are red. Sorry.
I think that was a symbolism for like you can be part of like a particular order and still have your own like originality. And I think that was what kind of Mace Windu kind of bought into like the whole play of things.
Yeah.
That
You know,
individuality for sure, for sure.
that was very strategic.
Right.
He was
Good job,
he
Lucas.
was he was a first among. No, and seriously, Lucas does earn credit to that. Everyone shits on him, but he's these things worked under the surface. A lot of it was nuance, But yeah, he was a first among equals, Mace. He really did rise to the Jedi Council as a master because of his individuality. He did stand out among this unified order.
Yep.
He was exceptional. He was the number two spot, arguably number one. I think force on force. I think he could have beat Yoda. Yoda maybe would have had another way,
Ooh.
but if it was
Hot
just
take.
force, I think Mace Windu would have pushed him back. Look, you could destroy, like you could put craters in the ground like a kilometer wide. Yoda would take a while and dig up the sand. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think Mace
Ooh,
was
maybe.
like
Interesting.
he
We
was
should start having debate episodes.
he was the spear. We
Mm.
should. He was the spear. He was the spear thrust of the Jedi Order. He was the bullet.
Right? I mean that's as a second in command, he's like Yoda's right-hand man. And so like Yoda was like the wise, like level-headed, like kind of like charming, like old leader. And yeah, like Mace Windu was the sword. He was the heavy hand.
Well, think of it this way, real quick. What Vader and Palpatine were, that's what Yoda and Mace were. Mace was the Vader
Yeah.
character. He was the hand. He was the power behind everything. But because they were the most powerful beings in the universe or in the galaxy at the end of the Republic before they were usurped by Vader and Sidious, right? So
Yeah.
they had the same dynamic. It was just out with the old and with the new. Mace was Vader's counterpoint, and that's why he was always so touchy with Anakin because they knew they were occupying that same space in the galaxy. So they were always at odds, trying to be like, until one replaced the other, literally, and disarm.
All right. My midichlorian count is higher than your midichlorian count. What are you gonna do about it?
Right? Yeah.
But putting Samuel Jackson as Mace Windu was such a big deal. If you think about symbolism and to have like a black man, have such a pivotal role in Star Wars and have such an important role in Star Wars. Like you guys said, he was like the vice president, maybe even the president.
Yeah.
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 Like that is like really cool.
I think that I can imagine the way that it really opened up the world to so many young kids to see that kind of representation, and also like make Star Wars feel more accessible. They could be like,
Yes.
oh, like I can like Star Wars, like I can think that this is cool. Like, look, like it's not just white people and aliens. Like there's characters of all color and races and religions and cultures.
And I also like how he was just very well represented. And what I mean by that is like his character just had like this form of adaptive control. Like he was in control of things, even though that led to certain demises, but he was a wise man, he did follow an order. He was a disciplined man. So I think to just see all those characteristics, in his role, was just very inspiring in so many different ways.
And he had grace too. Even when he dealt with politicians like even Palpatine or Bail Organa in those Senate scenes, he'd be like, "Thank you very much."
Grace.
And to women too, he treated women very, especially Padme. He's like, he would treat them like a gentleman. He was very. He adapted to every situation. He knew what it called for. When he was with his boys, with the Jedi's, that's when he'd take a harder hand and be like, "Listen, motherfucker, like, are you stupid?" Like, that's when he'd be like, I'm putting my foot down right now." But in certain scenarios, he was the most like just calm and voice of reason in many scenes. And I'm watching it, going back and rewatching those prequels. I'm like, he's right. Actually, they should listen to him right now.
Right?
I used to think, oh,
Right.
he's rash. No, I'm like, in this situation, he listen to this guy.
Exactly.
Right? He's actually more rational than most of you are being. Like
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yoda's saying that the Force will guide us, it'll be fine. Everyone else is getting angry or upset, and Mace is just like, what's wrong with
What
you guys?
was it him?
Like,
Was it him who asked Yoda, right? He's like, should we let the Senate know our power to use the Force is diminished? And Yoda's like, that'll cause chaos. That will cause, right? That was that way. Yeah, because he was asking Yoda.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that was episode 3 or episode 2. I forget which one.
Yeah. It's I think right down to the end, that like it's interesting that like the representation was so important and like what he represented was so important. And I think which is a real human moment is that even under all of that control and discipline, that there was so much like kind of hidden trauma going on in this character. And I think that's a very interesting reflection, I think, of our real lives, that you can look at somebody who is so put together and on top of it, like the people who, I guess, quote unquote, have it all that we aspire to or look up to. And I think it's important to know, like, that they're still having like their own human struggles.
Which we see a lot, right?
Yeah.
In clinical practice. A lot of people in where we will deem in society as you have it together, great paying job, money's not really an issue, but they're suffering from other different things, and they need help as well. Some people can appear to have it all together, and a lot of times, we see this, when we're looking at, celebrities or pop culture, we're like, oh my gosh, the celebrity looks so happy, and then a couple of weeks later, months later, we're like, wow, we didn't know that they're suffering from something and committed suicide. Like it's
or Heath Ledger.
Just tying that together with him being a black man, I think that sometimes symbolism as a black man is that we have to be strong, right? Like we can't cry, we can't show too much emotion. It's kind of like a big like stigma within the culture, and I think he definitely represented that. Like he couldn't be soft. He had to be in control all the time. He couldn't be vulnerable. So I think that was really good representation.
Yeah, and I think that's then something really beautiful that I guess like discourse like this can bring to the conversation of that both things can be true at the same time. Like you can be strong and disciplined and be doing your best to put a good like face forward, but you can also be deserving of understanding and empathy on the back end.
And the actor choice really does harken back to Samuel Jackson. Honestly, like Will Smith, as great as an actor as he can be, I don't think he could have had that nuance in this particular role that Sam Jackson has. Honestly, I feel like Lucas's assistant was like, which actor do you want on the list? He's like, I told you, the one that says bad motherfucker on it. Like, I want Sam Jackson. I wrote this role for him, and boom, the range, that's the word I'm going to use, the range, made him like, him and Palpatine were like the most interesting characters in the prequels, and Anakin, of course, because it was what was under the surface with Mace. You could see it, but it wasn't always spoken, but that's the beauty of his character, in my opinion.
Though, do I recall a rumor, or not even a rumor, it might have been true, that didn't Lucas want Tupac for the role?
Yeah, but he died though, right? Yeah,
he died.
Yeah, he died. Yeah, it wasn't
actually
written.
Did he really?
Yeah. He originally wanted Tupac for the role, but I think they were in discussions
96,
about it.
97.
That makes sense because Samuel L. Jackson was bald.
That's right? I never made that connection, but I guess
right. So
wisdom.
So we will leave you with that. Somewhere in the multiverse, there is a version.
There's a Tupac. Wow.
Where Tupac played Mace Windu.
That just shows you how long it was in production for.
Wow.
Yep.
For a few years, yeah.
But thank you so much for joining us today,
Truly.
Gil. This was fun. I hope you enjoyed yourself as well.
You're the man.
Yes, this was very enjoyable. I thank you guys for having me.
Thank you as well.
You're the man.
this party's over.
All right, enjoy the rest of your Saturday night.
Thank you guys. This was a great opportunity. It was fun.
Thank you again, Gilbert, for joining us for a fabulous conversation. His perspective was great. I mean, I love when any lifelong Star Wars fan is on, because it's always a nice point of conversation. But I found his perspective on how Mace really really like touched him with Samuel L. Jackson's performance and what that meant to him. That was definitely nice to touch on. Any other points for about Mace before we wrap it up, James?
Just a fantastically interesting character, and a good archetype for both Star Wars and mythology in general. I think in terms of science fantasy, you could see how much in the expanded universe, whether it's the comics or the novels, how much they relied on Mace, not just as an action figure or hero, but as a nuanced person to build stories around. Ultimately, I just think that Samuel Jackson, George Lucas, and Mace Windu himself, in an alternate dimension, it's just a powerfully lethal combination. It's a powerhouse of a character, really stuck in my psyche, in my life, really. Just growing up, like he's just that character that adds a lot to the franchise and really makes you just kind of apply rigidity versus flexibility in life. He's a symbol for that. As a metaphor, as a figurative character, you see what rigidity can get you in certain cases, and you can see where rigidity can help. And he's just a reference guide in that regard. So that's what it's about: taking those psychologies and applying it to the real world, so we can have a deeper understanding of the human experience.
Well
How about you?
Well said, my friend. I think he is an excellent representation of almost like the best and the worst of the Jedi. That he is like disciplined and he has this like deep connection to the Force, but that also didn't. But like, and as nice as that is, that still didn't save him. It didn't stop him. It didn't stop him from having his own personal trials and traumas. It didn't stop him from seeing the hubris and the overextended ego of the Jedi that blinded them to the movements around them. And I think I don't think it would be the same story without his figure. I think like his character is quite pivotal to the story. And I do love the content that fleshes him out more. Like, as always, makes him more human. He's not just he's not just a anecdote on a page. He's a very fleshed out character, and I'm glad we got to parse him out today.
That's exactly it. You said it very well. Without Mace, Star Wars wouldn't be what it is. He's a pivotal character and a turning point. It's when it goes from the Age of Republic to the Age of Empire through his death, and his character encapsulates all that in that
Right.
climactic moment.
Would you say that he himself is a Shatterpoint?
Yes, that's brilliant. That's the perfect way to round out.
Haha.
He is. He is a shadow. He's a glitch in the system too, in a sense. He's very different.
He is, and this has been a delight covering this delightful character with my delightful co-host today.
Likewise, you're too kind.
On our way out, as always, please check out us on all social medias, mindtheforce.com, Facebook, Instagram. Check us out on your favorite podcast streaming platform. Give us 5 stars so the internet knows we're cool. And we will see you all next time. Thank you for coming to another exciting episode of Mind the Force. We will see you next time, and stay mindful.